Hi everyone, Roy here. Thought I'd pop in to talk about Private Eye July, which is nearly upon us, the rapidly deployed reading event about private investigators. So, a month where we celebrate stories about those sleuths who earn their living by doing detection, but they're not police, they're not gifted amateurs, they're not people with some kind of job that puts them into crime type situations. They are private investigators. So this is led by Jim, Mystery and Mayhem, and there's a bunch of co-hosts. I'm one of them. Details down below. And going to talk about Pile of Possibilities TBR really, because need to get reading. So before I talk about what I'm going to read, actually Dr. Jennie is going to join in as well, hopefully, with a Sue Grafton book. So Sue Grafton's Alphabet series, starting with A for Alibi, are about a private investigator called Kinsey Milhone. They're set in the 1980s, and the alphabet runs all the way to the letter Y. But sadly, Sue Grafton passed away, and it's her wish that no one completes the series, so that's all she wrote. So Jennie's actually read, I think, all of them apart from Y, which she found a bit too sad, but maybe now's the time to tackle that one. I really enjoyed them as well, though I haven't gone as far through the series as Jennie has. I think I'm about in the M level. So one thing I always liked about Kinsey Milhone, that apparently is quite a good idea, is that in order to be versatile about situations and places she can go into, she has in her car a little black dress, and I might have added this on myself. It's made of some sort of magic fabric, some sort of man-made material that never creases. So she can put this little black dress on and dress it up, dress it down, means she can go anywhere from a sort of posh reception to a dive bar and look like she belongs there. Now, that wouldn't work for me. I wouldn't particularly have a problem wearing such an item, but I would look like the proverbial sack of muck with a rope round the middle. But I think Jim Rockford, television detective, whose show was on in the 70s, Jim Rockford probably had a similar approach. So as well as having a device for printing business cards in his car, he also has a surprising number of sports jackets. Now, given that he lives in a trailer, and I think this is a typical thing of the private investigator, they're not wealthy. You know, they might actually be pretty much poor. Lives in a trailer where you'd think closet space would be at a premium. Nevertheless, he has all these sports jackets, and I think that's his way of having a sort of a get-up that, again, can get him into anywhere. It's not like wearing a suit that looks too formal for some situations. It's not like being so casual you couldn't go to the country club and track down a wealthy suspect. So the Rockford clothing, well, what do you need? A reasonably smart shirt, plain colours or simple stripes, a pair of slacks, flares optional, chinos probably occupy similar symbolic territory these days, and then throw on your trusty sports jacket, maybe a pair of shades. Everything's gone dark, and you're ready for some unobtrusive surveillance and investigation. Okay, so never mind the outfits, what about the books? So the prompts obviously you don't have to follow the prompts, but if you like to have prompts, you can read something written between 1920 and 1970 and something written between 1970 and now. So looking at that earlier period, I did mention Sexton Blake, and maybe I'll get into a Sexton Blake. So a lot of his adventures were published in these little 60-page magazines during that period. I think this one's in the 1950s, The Woman Overboard. But if you want to explore the world of Sexton Blake, a detective who was created in Victorian times and was still being written about into the 1970s, the most recent collections, these ones, edited by Mark Hodder, there's 5 of these, and they're conveniently chunked up into time slots. So there's one that's a bit early for our purposes, where he's like causing trouble for the Kaiser. Sexton Blake versus the Master Crooks. Well, actually, the first story's in 1919. I won't tell if you don't. But basically, there's a period in that sort of 1920s time when his adversaries are basically supervillains, such as Zenith the Albino, Waldo the Wonder Man, and assorted mad geniuses, femme fatales, etc. So Sexton Blake could be good. More recently, this has come out. So Michael Moorcock, probably best known as a science fiction fantasy author, he used to work for the Sexton Blake publishers and wrote one of the adventures, Caribbean Crisis, which is very difficult to come by in its original form. And the editor didn't like Moorcock's politics, so it was edited a lot. So it's been restored and has a prequel. And it's a collaboration between Moorcock and Mark Hodder, who, as well as being an author in his own right, is also probably the world's greatest living expert on Sexton Blake. So yeah, this could be a good one to read. Would have been in the 60s originally, but of course the new work and the prequel is now, so I'm not quite sure where to fit that in the timeline. Both, I suppose, but I'm dying to get onto this, despite the rather spare cover. So Sexton Blake. I've had a few near misses. So I bought the Golden Age book of Mammoth Detectives, and it's the Mammoth book of detectives who aren't private investigators, although it's quite a good collection anyway. Then Nero Wolfe, the first Nero Wolfe book. It's supposed to be on its way, but it's not here yet. If Nero Wolfe has stood me up, I do have a backup plan, courtesy of Rick 00 Pipe, who kindly sent me this ages ago. It's a gold medal book from the 60s called Way of a Wanton, and the detective is Shell Scott, who is a private investigator, and if not for Private Eye July, it could last until Garb August, I suppose. She was young, she was beautiful, and she was dead. They found her in the lush Hollywood swimming pool, and nobody cared. Nobody cried, except me. I'm the guy they called Rough Tough Shell Scott Private Eye, and I as private as a telescope. I cared. I would have to tear Hollywood apart to catch a killer, so I did. So that looks like good hard-boiled fun, but still hoping for Nero Wolfe. Then in that post-1970 period, various things. I'll have to land on something pretty soon. Laurie R. King has written a brilliant series with Sherlock Holmes and Mary Russell. So they're kind of the Mary Russell adventures. And with some pushing the envelope of the timeline a bit. Holmes is a bit younger than you might expect, and he actually marries Mary Russell, and they become a couple solving crimes. So although most of Conan Doyle's canonical output, did I say that the right way around, of Holmes stories is pre-1920, obviously these are written a lot more recently, so this would count as well. And I really want to reacquaint myself with the series. I think I've read the first 3 or 4. So I bought a bundle of these. They look good. New year, 1924. Mary Russell is drawn into a new intrigue when she and her husband, Sherlock Holmes, pay a visit to Holmes' gravely ill brother, Mycroft. Mycroft has received a strange package. Talking of which, I can just see the Hermes lady putting a package into our parcel box. Contains the papers of a missing English spy named Kimball O'Hara, the hero of Rudyard Kipling's Kim, who is feared to have been taken hostage or even killed. So it's also a kind of literary crossover. Wow, great. Okay. Yeah, another slight misfire there. So this The Code by GB Joyce is a Brad Shade thriller, and the TV show Private Eyes was based on this book. Loosely, and I did know that the book was very different and different tone. I think this is quite gritty, whereas the show is kind of cozy mystery comedy thriller kind of thing. We really like it, actually. Anyway, so The Code. So the Brad Shade is an ex-hockey player, so it's written by a guy who knows his sport. I think he was a sports writer. So in the show, Shade assists a real private eye and then becomes one himself. Not so in this. He's one of those like person with job that involves him in crime. So it's not really for this. So it does look really good, and accidentally means I could be participating in Summer of Sport if I read this at some point. Another possibility, who knew Ron Ely, the Tarzan and Doc Savage actor, for it is he, wrote a couple of PI novels. First one's called Night Shadows, actually reviewed pretty well. Want to read this at some point. Also an anthology that has at least got one private detective in it, Crime Yellow. I bought this when I was making a video about yellow jacketed books and how somehow yellow is the symbol for sensational fiction of various kinds. It does look really good, and let's see, one of these, Midnight at the Lost and Found by Mark Timlin, does feature a private investigator, so I'll definitely slip that in, whatever occurs. Probably the front runner is one of the, I think, 2 Veronica Mars books. So Veronica Mars starts life as a TV series. Again, we like it, and she's pretty young in the show, but her dad is a private detective, a real proper private detective. And host and co-host, one of our meetings, which we have regularly in a booth in the back of a dimly lit bar, where nobody asks any questions and everybody's got a past. We talked about assistants to private eyes, and we thought they would count. Anyway, in this book that's set after the show, she actually is a private investigator with a license plate and everything, card. So Veronica Mars, and it's by the guy who created the show, so it's, in the many variations of media tie-ins, that's another thing really, when the person whose creation it is writes the tie-in book. So there you go. Lots of possibilities, and that's not all. What do I read in the still watches of the night when I don't want to be turning lights on to read books? On the Kindle I've got The Missing American by Quay Quarty. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Book 1 of 4. Gordon Tilton is a lonely widower who befriends a young woman online. When her sister's injured in a car accident, he sends her thousands of dollars to cover the hospital bill. Runs off to Ghana to surprise his new love. We've all been there. But he soon disappears without a trace. Frustrated by the inadequacies of the local police in Accra, his son Derek turns to a PI agency for assistance, where there's a new detective on the scene determined to prove her worth. Emma Jan. Well, that sounds great. So because due to my immense age, I sleep in the manner of a medieval peasant. 2 blocks of sleep with an hour or 2 gap in between, which doesn't bother me, but I've got to do something, so reading is good. So pop that on as well. And finally, a short story, a bit of a secret project this, rediscovering a juvenile detective from the early 1920s. Myself and hopefully Pat from Book Chat with Pat will be reading said story and telling you about the character and her interesting origin and how she's had a sort of afterlife in the world of literature. Okay, so looks like a fabulous month. I will be wearing these clothes throughout the entire month, which could be good. And yeah, other than that, I'll be back soon with something else. Okay, bye.